The last sliver of autumn light, a bruised purple and burnt orange, bled through the tall arched window of the cozy corner, painting the worn wooden floorboards in fleeting streaks of color. Elara Vance sighed, a soft, contented sound that mingled with the gentle hum of the antique espresso machine. It was her favorite time of day in the bookstore and cafe she had lovingly built from the ground up. The quiet hour before closing, when the last few customers lingered over cooling mugs and the scent of old paper and brewing tea hung heavy and sweet in the air. The cozy corner was more than just a shop. It was a sanctuary. Mismatched velvet armchairs invited patrons to sink in, their backs to the world, while shelves crammed with stories of every genre seemed to whisper promises of adventure and solace. Elara, with her unruly auburn curls often escaping a loose braid and eyes the color of warm honey, moved through the space with an almost balletic grace. She knew every creak in the floor, every book by its spine, and most of her regulars by their preferred brew. Today, however, a new kind of quiet had settled over her. It wasn't the peaceful hush of a sleepy afternoon, but a subtle vibration, a hum of anticipation that had been building for the past week. It had started with a book. She remembered it perfectly. A Tuesday, just like any other. A young woman, a tourist she thought, had asked for a recommendation for a book that feels like a warm hug. Elara had immediately pointed her towards the Midnight Library, a whimsical tale she adored. The woman had bought it, paid in cash, and left with a smile. Later that evening, while tidying the returned books, Elara had found it, a small cream-colored card, tucked between the pages of a copy of Pride and Prejudice, a book someone else had just returned. On it, in elegant, looping script, were only 2 words. A-P-A-A, perfect choice. It was nothing, really. A simple compliment. But it wasn't signed and it wasn't addressed to anyone. It felt personal, somehow. As if someone had observed her recommendation, perhaps from a quiet corner, and decided to acknowledge it. Elara had dismissed it as a quirky customer leaving a note, maybe for the next reader, but the words had lingered in her mind like a forgotten melody. Now, as the sky outside deepened to an inky blue, she wiped down the counter, her gaze drifting over the neatly arranged stack of new arrivals. Her fingertips brushed against a leather-bound journal she'd been admiring, a beautiful blank slate waiting for stories. "Elara, dear, you look lost in thought." Mrs. Gable, a spry woman in her late 70s, with a penchant for historical romances and Earl Grey tea, smiled warmly from her usual armchair by the fireplace. A half-read novel rested open on her lap. Elara offered a genuine smile back. "Just enjoying the quiet, Mrs. Gable, and thinking about what new tea blend to try next." She always tried to have a new inspiration tea each week. This week, it was Autumn Ember, a spicy blend of cinnamon, ginger, and rooibos. "Well, you certainly have a knack for it," Mrs. Gable chuckled, taking a sip from her mug. "This Autumn Ember is just delightful. Puts a little spark right into a chilly evening. I'm glad you like it." Elara glanced at the clock. "Almost closing time. Anything else I can get you before I lock up?" "No, dear, I'm quite content. Just finishing this chapter." Mrs. Gable settled back, her eyes twinkling. "Though, I did notice a rather intriguing addition to your little display over there." She nodded towards a small decorative shelf near the entrance, usually reserved for new artisan crafts or local artwork. Elara followed her gaze. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Nestled amongst a display of handmade bookmarks and small potted succulents was a single, perfectly formed paper crane, crafted from the very cream-colored cardstock she'd seen a week ago. And tucked into its delicate wing, barely visible, was another small, folded note. Her heart gave a little flutter, a butterfly trapped in her ribs. "Oh," she managed, her voice a little breathy. I hadn't noticed that." Mrs. Gable's smile widened knowingly. "It's quite lovely, isn't it? Such intricate work. Must have been left by a very thoughtful soul." Elara felt a blush creeping up her neck. She knew, with a certainty that hummed through her veins, that this was connected to the first note. This was no coincidence. Someone was leaving her messages. As Mrs. Gable finally gathered her things and wished Elara a good night, the bell above the door jingling softly as she departed, Elara found herself alone in the hushed warmth of the cozy corner. She walked slowly towards the display shelf, her gaze fixed on the paper crane. It was exquisitely folded, a tiny work of art. With trembling fingers, she carefully extracted the note. It was smaller than the first, and her name, Elara, was written on it, again in that elegant, looping script. Beneath her name, a single line. May your quiet hours be filled with wonder. Wonder. The word resonated deep within her. It was exactly what she often craved, what she sought in the pages of her beloved books. And now, it was being offered to her, anonymously, by someone who seemed to see past her polite smiles and efficient service, someone who saw Hared. She pressed the tiny note to her chest, feeling a warmth spread through her. Who was this person? A regular? Someone new? She hadn't seen anyone place it there. The paper crane certainly hadn't been there when she'd opened this morning. Over the next few days, Elara found herself looking at her customers with new eyes. Every person who walked through the door became a potential candidate. Was it old Mr. Henderson, who always ordered a black coffee and spent hours reading the newspaper? Unlikely. His handwriting was a shaky scrawl. Was it the young woman with the elaborate tattoos who always chose fantasy novels? Possibly. She had an artistic flair. Or perhaps the quiet man who always sat in the corner booth, sketching in a leather-bound notebook, rarely speaking more than a few words to order his chamomile tea? Liam Thorne. He was a relatively new face in Oakhaven, having moved to a small cottage on the outskirts of town a few months ago. He was tall, with dark, slightly disheveled hair that always looked like he'd just run his fingers through it, and eyes that were a startling shade of hazel, often shadowed with a thoughtful intensity. He always wore simple, comfortable clothes, soft sweaters, worn jeans, and carried an air of quiet contemplation. He never stayed long, rarely spoke, but he always lingered over his tea, his gaze often drifting around the bookstore, as if absorbing its essence. Elara had always found him intriguing, a silent observer, but she'd never considered him a potential suitor, let alone a secret admirer. He seemed too self-contained. Still, she found herself watching him a little more closely now, whenever he came in. He had a habit of leaving his cup precisely in the center of the saucer, and his movements were always deliberate, unhurried. Could it be him? The thought sent a peculiar shiver down her spine. A week passed, and no new whispers appeared. Elara found herself feeling an unexpected pang of disappointment. She hadn't realized how much she'd come to anticipate the small secret messages. She even found herself talking aloud to the empty bookstore after hours. Half joking, "All right, Mr. Whisperer, where are you hiding today?" The silence that followed felt louder than usual. She meticulously checked every book returned, every shelf, every nook and cranny. Nothing. Perhaps the person had gotten bored, or perhaps she had imagined the significance of it all. Maybe it was just a random act of kindness that she had overanalyzed. It wouldn't be the first time her imagination, fueled by years of reading romance novels, had run away with her. She tried to push it aside, focusing on her work, on perfecting her new winter solstice tea blend, a comforting mix of black tea, orange peel, and clove. But a small part of her felt a hollow ache, a longing for that peculiar sense of being seen. Then, on a particularly blustery Saturday, when the wind howled like a banshee outside and rain lashed against the windows, Liam Thorne walked in. He wore a dark, heavy coat, and his hair was damp from the weather. He ordered his usual chamomile tea, his voice a low rumble, and settled into his corner booth, pulling out his leather-bound notebook. Elara, busy serving a rush of customers seeking refuge from the storm, tried not to stare, but her eyes kept drifting towards him. He seemed utterly absorbed in his sketching, his brow furrowed in concentration. Was he drawing the bookstore? Or something from his own imagination? She wished she knew. Later, as the storm eased and the last customers began to trickle out, Liam rose from his booth. He left a generous tip as always and gave Elara a polite, almost shy nod. "Thank you, Elara," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "The tea was perfect." "You're welcome, Liam," she replied, her heart doing that little flutter again. She noticed his eyes linger on her for a fraction of a second longer than usual, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. Then he was gone, the bell above the door chiming him out into the damp twilight. Elara started clearing his table. She picked up his empty mug, wiped down the polished wood. And then she saw it. Nestled beneath the coaster, a single loose tea leaf. But it wasn't just any tea leaf. It was a dried orange peel, shaped almost like a tiny, abstract heart. And beside it, a small, neatly folded square of cream-colored paper. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. This time there was no name, just a single, elegantly penned word. Scene. Elara gasped, a soft, involuntary sound. Scene charaine. The word struck her with the force of a physical touch. It wasn't about her choice of book, or her quiet hours. It was about, her. It was about the unspoken parts of her, the longing she sometimes felt, the quiet observer within her who longed to be observed in return. She looked out the window, her gaze sweeping across the now empty street. Liam was long gone. Had he left it there deliberately? Had he just slipped it under the coaster, knowing she would find it? The orange peel heart. It was so subtle, so intimate. A wave of warmth, potent and exhilarating, washed over her. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper. A feeling of connection, of being truly understood, even by someone she barely knew. She clutched the tiny note, the dried orange peel, and the original paper crane note, which she now kept tucked carefully in the pocket of her apron. She walked over to the tall window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The streetlights of Oakhaven glowed, casting long, watery reflections on the wet pavement. Who was Liam Thorne? And why was he communicating with her in such a beautiful, clandestine way? What did he mean by scene? Had he noticed her quiet moments of dreaming, her occasional wistful glances out the window, the way she sometimes hummed old folk songs under her breath, when she thought no one was listening? A smile, soft and hesitant, touched her lip. This wasn't just a romance novel playing out in her mind. This was real. These whispers, these gentle, thoughtful messages, were weaving a delicate thread between her and a mysterious stranger. And for the first time in a long time, Elara felt a tremor of true wonder, a hopeful anticipation for what the next whisper might bring. The cozy corner, usually her peaceful haven, now felt charged with a quiet, thrilling energy. She couldn't wait to find out more. She woke the next morning with the peculiar sensation of having dreamed in Technicolor. The memory of the kiss, that feather-light, almost imperceptible touch on her lips, a phantom caress that had felt so real, lingered like the intoxicating scent of fresh vanilla and roasted beans. Her heart, usually a steady drum beat, was doing a soft, syncopated rhythm, a gentle flutter against her ribs. She stretched, gazing at the ceiling of her small apartment above the cozy corner, the familiar cracks in the plaster taking on a new, almost whimsical pattern in the dawn light. This wasn't just a game, a delightful diversion from the predictable rhythm of her days. This stranger, whoever he was seeing her, truly seeing her, in a way no one had in years. He was weaving a spell, not with grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but with quiet observations and tender, carefully chosen words. The thought made her smile, a genuine, unforced curve of her lips that felt both private and deeply satisfying. She felt lighter, more vibrant, as if a new color had been added to the palette of her life. She padded to her tiny kitchen, the morning light already filtering through the window, painting stripes across her worn wooden floorboards. The aroma of brewing Earl Grey tea, her ritualistic morning comfort, filled the air. But even the comfort felt different today, tinged with an exciting, almost mischievous unknown. She found herself wondering, as she carefully poured the steaming amber liquid into her favorite chipped mug, how he delivered these messages. Were they written on elegant stationery, or prosaic napkins? Tucked under a sugar dispenser, or hidden within the pages of a book she was currently devouring? The thought sent a delightful shiver down her spine, a frisson of pure pleasure. It was a treasure hunt, a daily quest for a small, precious piece of poetry designed just for her. She longed to know his voice, the timbre of his laughter, the exact shade of his eyes, the curve of his smile. But for now, the exquisite mystery was part of the charm, a fragile, iridescent bubble she wasn't quite ready to pop. The anticipation itself was a gift. Descending the creaky stairs into the cafe, Elara paused at the threshold, taking a deep, fortifying breath. The cozy corner was quiet in the pre-opening stillness, bathed in the soft, diffused light filtering through the lace-curtained windows. The scent of roasted beans, warm vanilla, and the comforting aroma of old paperbacks hung in the air, her favorite symphony of fragrances. Her eyes immediately scanned the familiar nooks and crannies. The worn armchair by the window, its fabric softened by countless hours of quiet contemplation. The polished wooden counter, still gleaming from last night's scrub. The towering bookshelf, home to countless stories and untold adventures. Was he watching her now? Had he already been here, a phantom presence leaving his mark? A flush crept up her neck, a blush that warmed her cheeks. She walked behind the counter, her gaze sweeping over the various surfaces, lingering on every potential hiding spot. Nothing. Her anticipation, a warm, hopeful glow moments ago, flickered with a tiny, almost imperceptible pang of disappointment. Had the magic ended? Then, as she reached for the day's fresh pastries, their golden brown crusts still glistening with warmth, tucked beneath the ceramic plate of almond croissants, a small folded square of cream-colored paper. Her breath hitched, a small involuntary gasp escaping her lips. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she picked it up, her heart hammering a soft, eager rhythm against her ribs. It was the same elegant, looping script, a hand that spoke of patience and thoughtfulness, of a quiet, steady presence. She unfolded it carefully, as if handling a fragile butterfly wing, her eyes devouring each word. This time there was no quote from a literary classic, no gentle observation of her reading habits. Instead, it was a short, deeply personal message, written with an intimacy that made her cheeks flush even hotter. Your smile, Alara, is like the first ray of sun on a cloudy morning. It chases away the shadows and promises brighter days. It makes the coffee taste sweeter, the books feel warmer, and even the dust motes dancing in the sunlight seem to glitter with more purpose. May your day be as bright as the light you effortlessly bring into this quiet corner of the world. And at the bottom, a tiny, intricately drawn coffee bean, a familiar, charming signature. Alara pressed the note to her chest, her fingers clutching the delicate paper. A soft, almost inaudible gasp escaped her lips. He had used her name. And he had commented on her smile, a spontaneous, often unconscious gesture. It felt incredibly intimate, a direct acknowledgement of her presence, her being, not just her role as the cafe owner. Her cheeks burned, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was a deep, soul-stirring warmth that spread through her veins, settling comfortably in her chest. He saw her, not just as the efficient barista or the purveyor of pastries, but as Gellerine. The thought made her feel both cherished and exposed, in the most wonderful, exhilarating way. She carefully folded the note and tucked it into the deep pocket of her apron, a secret warmth against her skin, a constant reminder of his tender words. Throughout the morning, as customers drifted in and out of the cozy corner, their conversations a gentle hum, Alara found herself subtly observing everyone. The elderly gentleman who always ordered a black coffee and meticulously read the newspaper, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. The young student hunched over her laptop, nursing a latte and a mountain of textbooks. The couple sharing a scone and quiet, intertwined laughter in the corner booth. She tried to imagine which of them possessed a hand that could write such elegant script, a mind that could craft such tender words, a heart that beat with such quiet adoration. Was he hiding in plain sight, a chameleon among her regulars? Or was he a fleeting presence, slipping in and out before she even noticed, a ghost of kindness? The game had intensified, the stakes raised by his direct address. Every glance, every gesture, every fleeting expression seemed to hold a potential clue. But no one seemed out of the ordinary. No one met her gaze with a knowing glint. No one held an enigmatic smile. It was both frustrating and thrilling. The cozy corner bustled with its usual mid-morning energy. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baking pastries mingled with the quiet murmur of conversations, the rustle of turning pages, and the soft clinking of ceramic mugs. Alara moved with practiced ease behind the counter, her hands deftly pouring lattes, steaming milk to perfection, exchanging pleasantries and knowing smiles with her regulars. Her hands were busy, her body in motion, but her mind hummed with the delightful, tantalizing mystery. She found herself smiling more, a genuine, radiant smile that indeed seemed to brighten the cafe, just as his note had suggested. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps her smile did make things sweeter, casting a warm glow over the quiet haven she had created. The thought was empowering, infusing her day with a newfound lightness. Later that afternoon, during a lull when only a few patrons remained, lost in their own worlds of books and laptops, Alara found another note. This one was tucked inside a book she had been reading during her break, a well-loved, slightly dog-eared copy of Pride and Prejudice, her current escape. It was a single, elegantly penned line, acting as a delicate bookmark. I wonder if you find Mr. Darcy as infuriatingly charming as I do, Alara, or if your heart leans more towards a different, perhaps less complicated hero. Alara laughed softly, a genuine melodic sound that drew a fleeting glance from a student nearby. This was a shared secret, a conversation across the invisible barrier of his anonymity, a delightful literary intimacy. It was a precious glimpse into his literary tastes and his gentle sense of humor. He wasn't just observing her, he was engaging with her, finding common ground, weaving threads of connection based on shared passions. He was a reader, like her. That connection felt profound, a bridge built between two kindred spirits. The notes continued over the next few days, each one a perfectly crafted miniature, a delicate thread spun between them, strengthening the invisible bond. One morning, she found a small, beautifully pressed poppy seed, nestled amongst the freshly ground coffee beans in the grinder, with a note that read, "For your strength, Alara, like the poppy that pushes through the soil, resilient and beautiful in its quiet determination." It was a subtle acknowledgement of her tireless work, her dedication to her beloved cafe. Another day after she had accidentally spilled a tray of sugar packets, scattering them across the floor with a soft clatter, and then laughed it off with a customer, a note appeared under her tips jar. "Your grace under pressure, Alara, is as admirable as your kindness." He saw her flaws, her minor mishaps, and turned them into strengths, into moments of endearing humanity. He celebrated her resilience, her quiet dedication, her inherent goodness. He was painting a portrait of her, one brushstroke at a time, each stroke more tender and insightful than the last, revealing aspects of herself she sometimes overlooked. Alara found herself looking forward to each day with an almost giddy excitement, her heart fluttering like a bird's wings, eager for the next whisper, the next insight into the kind soul behind the words. One particularly blustery afternoon, just as the sky turned a bruised purple, promising a storm, a pipe burst in the cafe's small restroom. Water began to trickle, then stream, across the tiled floor, threatening to seep into the main cafe area. Alara, usually calm and collected, felt a surge of panic. She wasn't a plumber, and her usual handyman, old Mr. Abernathy, was out of town visiting his sister. As she frantically tried to stem the flow with a haphazard pile of towels, feeling utterly overwhelmed, a kind voice behind her offered, "Need a hand with that, Alara? Looks like you've got a bit of a predicament." She turned, startled, to see a tall, broad-shouldered man, a regular she recognized as Mr. Henderson, a quiet architect who often worked in the corner booth, sketching designs in his notebook. He was holding his laptop bag, clearly on his way out, his brow furrowed with concern. "Oh, Mr. Henderson, I'm so sorry. It's a disaster," she exclaimed, feeling flustered and a little embarrassed by the growing puddle. "No worries at all," he said, setting his bag down with a soft thud. "I'm fairly handy with these sorts of things. Mind if I take a quick look?" Within minutes, he had assessed the situation, found the main shutoff valve with surprising efficiency, and stopped the deluge. He even offered to call a trusted plumber he knew, a friend who could be there within the hour. Alara was immensely grateful, her shoulders slumping with relief. "You're a lifesaver, Mr. Henderson," she said, genuinely relieved, a shaky laugh escaping her. "Just glad to help, Alara." He smiled. A kind, unassuming smile that reached his eyes. "Wouldn't want anything to happen to my favorite coffee spot." He stayed for a moment, chatting about the best way to handle the repair, offering practical advice, then left with a friendly wave, leaving Alara to deal with the aftermath and a renewed sense of gratitude. Later that evening, after the plumber had come and gone, leaving a temporary fix and a promise for a permanent one the next day, Alara was exhausted but deeply relieved. She was tidying up, wiping down tables and straightening chairs, when she found a note tucked into the sugar caddy on the very table where Mr. Henderson had been sitting earlier. Her fingers, still a little sticky from cleaning, carefully retrieved it. Even when the unexpected deluge threatens to overwhelm, Elara, your spirit remains unshaken, a beacon of calm amidst the chaos. And it seems you have a guardian angel in unexpected places, ready to lend a hand. The way you handle adversity with grace and a touch of humor. Perhaps, one day, I can be more than just a silent observer, watching from the wings, and instead, be a more active participant in your world. Elara's eyes widened, her heart giving a startled leap. He had seen the whole thing. He had been Ava Ray, in the cafe, during the mini-crisis. And he had observed her reaction, her resilience, her quiet determination. He wasn't Mr. Henderson, as the note clearly distinguished between the guardian angel and the silent observer. This meant he was someone else who had witnessed the event, someone who had silently watched her struggle and her relief. The last line sent a thrilling jolt through her veins, a frisson of pure excitement. Perhaps one day I can be more than just a silent observer. Was he hinting at revealing himself? The thought made her heart pound a little faster, a crescendo of anticipation building within her. The mystery, once a delightful game of deduction and discovery, was now a deep ache in her heart, a longing that grew with each passing day. She longed to know his name, to see his face, to hear the voice that matched such beautiful, thoughtful words. She found herself scanning faces with renewed intensity, searching for a spark of recognition, a telltale sign that would unveil her secret admirer. Was he the young artist who sketched in the mornings? The quiet librarian who always ordered a double espresso? The possibilities were both exhilarating and frustrating, a tantalizing puzzle she desperately wanted to solve. One rainy afternoon, the kind of day that invited quiet contemplation and steaming mugs of tea, Elara sat by the window, nursing a cup of her favorite lavender Earl Grey, lost in thought. The cafe was quiet, only the gentle patter of rain against the glass breaking the peaceful silence. She wasn't reading, just gazing out, watching the world blur through the rain-streaked pane, feeling a familiar, comfortable introspection settle over her. A customer had left a book on a table near the window, and as Elara went to retrieve it, she found a note slipped between its pages, tucked precisely where a bookmark would be. Even in moments of quiet contemplation, Elara, when the world outside is gray and weeping, you hold a particular luminosity, a gentle inner glow that seems to defy the weather. I often wonder what thoughts dance behind those thoughtful eyes, what dreams you weave in the quiet spaces of your mind. Perhaps one day, you might share them with someone who listens intently, someone who cherishes the unspoken as much as the spoken. A wave of profound emotion washed over Elara. He understood her quiet moments, her introspection, her need for solitude. He saw past the bustling cafe owner to the woman who sometimes just needed to sit and be, to simply exist in the quiet rhythm of her own thought. The offer to listen intently felt like an invitation to a deeper, more intimate connection, a silent promise of understanding and acceptance. It was a powerful, tender gesture, reaching across the anonymity and touching her soul. Elara found herself consciously slowing down, lingering a little longer by the window, letting her gaze drift, hoping he might be watching. She started leaving a particular book, a cherished collection of poetry she adored, filled with her own dog-eared pages and underlined verses, open on her counter, hoping he might notice, hoping he might leave another comment, another shared thought. She began to wonder if he was watching her from outside, through the rain-streaked window, a silent guardian, or from a secluded corner booth, hidden behind a newspaper or a steaming mug. The feeling of being seen, truly understood, was intoxicating, addictive even, a balm to parts of her heart she hadn't realized were aching. Days turned into a week, each one bringing new whispers that continued to deepen the mystery and her longing. Some were tender observations about the changing seasons, linking them beautifully to her spirit, like the autumn leaves. You hold a vibrant beauty, even as you prepare for quiet transformation, full of promise and resilience. Others were more playful, commenting on her choice of music. Your taste in jazz, Elara, is impeccable. It provides the perfect backdrop to quiet contemplation and excellent coffee, a symphony of subtle delights. He seemed to know her routine, her preferences, her moods, her unspoken thoughts. It was clear he spent a considerable amount of time in her cafe, or at least observing it with meticulous, loving attention. Elara started noticing a subtle pattern in the delivery of the notes. They often appeared in the late morning, after the initial rush had subsided, leaving a brief moment of calm, or in the late afternoon just before closing, when the cafe emptied out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She began to pay closer attention during these times, watching every customer who came in, every lingering glance, every subtle movement. But still, no one stood out. No one seemed to fit the poetic, thoughtful persona of her secret admirer. It was as if he was a ghost, a whisper in the wind, materializing only through his exquisitely crafted words. The anonymous nature of the messages, once charming and thrilling, now began to feel a little bittersweet, a gentle ache in her heart. She wanted to thank him, to tell him how much his words meant to her, how they had brightened her days, and brought a sense of wonder and possibility back into her life. She wanted to know if his eyes held the same warmth as his words, if his voice was as gentle as his pen strokes, if his presence was as comforting as his sentiments. The kiss from that very first note, the one that had felt so real, was a constant, tantalizing reminder of the physical connection she craved, the desire to bridge the gap between words and reality. One sunny Tuesday, a day filled with the promise of spring, Elara was arranging a display of new cookbooks by the window, humming a cheerful tune, lost in thought. She reached for a particularly vibrant volume on Mediterranean cuisine, when the small brass bell above the door chimed, announcing a new arrival. She looked up, expecting her regular lunchtime crowd to begin filtering in. A man stood just inside the doorway, silhouetted against the bright, golden light streaming in from the street, holding a single, vibrant bluebell, its delicate petals a startling sapphire. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway, and his dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been walking quickly or running a hand through it in thought. For a fleeting second, their eyes met across the sunlit space. A jolt, sharp and sudden, went through Elara, a visceral recognition that vibrated through her entire being. There was something in his gaze, a profound depth, a hesitant warmth, a touch of vulnerability, that felt intensely familiar, like a melody she'd heard before, but couldn't quite place. A memory just out of reach. He took a tentative step forward, then hesitated, his shoulders tensing almost imperceptibly. A small, almost shy smile touched his lips, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, which held a hint of longing, or perhaps intense shyness. Before Elara could react, before she could even utter a greeting, before the words could form on her tongue, a customer rushed past him, excusing herself loudly as she hurried to the counter to place an order, breaking the fragile spell. The moment shattered like delicate glass. When Elara looked back, the man was gone. The bluebell was no longer in his hand. She felt a pang of disappointment so sharp it surprised her, a visceral sense of loss for a connection almost made. Had that truly been him? The bluebell, it was such a specific, delicate, almost poetic gesture. It felt right. Later that day, feeling a little deflated and haunted by the missed connection, Elara found a note tucked under a coaster on the very table closest to the door, where the man had stood. Her fingers traced the elegant script, her heart thrumming with a renewed hope. The bluebell, Elara, represents humility and everlasting love. It was meant to convey a silent admiration, a gentle promise, a symbol of devotion. I almost spoke, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but the words caught in my throat, tangled by a sudden rush of shyness, by the sheer overwhelming beauty of your presence. Forgive my fleeting courage. My retreat into... Elara clutched the note, her heart doing a frantic, joyful dance. It yet been him. The man with the bluebell. He had been so close, so incredibly close. He had felt the same shyness, the same hesitation, the same pounding heart. And he had left her the bluebell. She looked around, her gaze sweeping the cafe, searching. And there it was, tucked into a small empty teacup on the counter, near the display of new cookbooks, a single, delicate bluebell, its petals a vibrant sapphire against the cream ceramic, a silent testament to his bravery and his longing. A wave of profound warmth spread through her, chasing away the last vestiges of disappointment. He was real. He was here. He was just as shy and hesitant as she imagined, a perfect counterpart to her own quiet, introspective nature. Thought that he almost spoke, that he was wrestling with the same anxieties she felt about stepping out of the comfort of anonymity, forged an even deeper, more powerful connection between them. He wasn't just a witty wordsmith. He was a sensitive, thoughtful man, vulnerable and courageous in equal measure. The next morning the whisper was more direct, bolder, yet still imbued with his characteristic gentleness. It wasn't tucked away. It was propped up against the sugar bowl on the counter, clearly visible the moment she walked in, a clear declaration. Yalara. I know the past few weeks have been unusual. Extraordinary even. You've let me glimpse into your beautiful mind, and you've allowed me to share parts of mine. Last night, our conversation, even through the veil of technology, felt like coming home. It was more profound than anything I've ever experienced. I'm standing at a crossroads, Alara, and I have a feeling you are too. The anonymity, while it served its purpose in building something truly honest, now feels like a barrier to what I hope is next. I want to see you. Properly. There's a little coffee shop on Elm Street, the Daily Grind, that makes a killer lavender latte. I'll be there tomorrow, Saturday, at 10 a.m. If you're willing to take a chance on a face that might not live up to the words, or a voice that might sound less poetic in person, please join me. If you don't come, I'll understand. The magic of the unseen is a powerful thing to protect. But if you do, I promise to be nothing less than the man I've shown you in these whispers. Liam. Demne. Elara's breath caught in her throat. The paper, thick and cream-colored, trembled slightly in her hand. Liam. O. So that was his name. A good, strong name, yet it felt as gentle and unassuming as the whispers he'd left for her. The note wasn't tucked away. It was propped up, a deliberate, brave act. It was an invitation, a challenge, a plea wrapped in vulnerability. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation and fear. This was it. The moment she had both yearned for and dreaded. The leap from the ethereal realm of words and shared thoughts into the tangible world of sight, sound, and touch. The comfort of anonymity, which had allowed them both to shed their masks and expose their truest selves, was now being discarded, like a chrysalis shedding its skin. She traced the elegant swoop of his signature, the L in Liam, a mirror to the L that had started so many of his notes. He was asking her to step out into the light with him. A lavender latte. He remembered her fleeting mention of it weeks ago, a casual comment she'd made in one of her own whispered responses, about how she'd always wanted to try one but never quite got around to it. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes about his attentiveness, his ability to recall and cherish the minutiae of her life. It warmed her, a soft, insistent glow in her chest. Saturday. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. She spent the rest of Friday in a haze. Her usual routine felt like a distant echo. The scent of brewing coffee, the comforting rhythm of her work, the familiar faces of her neighbors, all blurred into the background as her mind replayed Liam's words, conjuring 1,000 different scenarios for their meeting. What would he look like? Would he be tall? Short? Dark-haired or fair? Would his eyes hold the same warmth and wisdom that shone through his prose? Would his smile be as kind as his words? The anxieties she'd felt about stepping out of her comfort zone were still there, a knot in her stomach, but they were now intertwined with an almost unbearable excitement. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified of the fall, but utterly captivated by the beauty of the landscape below. She found herself staring into her closet, a strange feeling of inadequacy washing over her. What did one wear to meet the man who had seen her soul before he'd seen her face? Something comfortable, something that felt like hair, but also something that conveyed the quiet confidence she hoped she possessed. She settled on a soft moss green linen dress, simple yet elegant, and a pair of worn leather ankle boots. It felt authentic. Sleep was elusive that night. Every rustle of leaves outside her window, every distant car passing by, seemed to amplify the thrumming anticipation within her. She pictured Liam, sitting alone in the coffee shop, perhaps nursing his own drink, wondering if she would come. The thought propelled her out of bed even before her alarm could sound. She arrived at the daily grind a few minutes before 10, her heart doing a nervous jig. The scent of roasted beans and sweet pastries filled the air, a comforting anchor in the storm of her emotions. She scanned the room, a small, cozy space with mismatched wooden tables and a wall adorned with local art. And then she saw him. He was sitting at a table by the window, a book open in front of him, though his gaze was fixed on the entrance. He wasn't looking directly at her, but rather scanning the faces of new arrivals with an almost imperceptible eagerness. He wasn't overtly handsome in a movie star way, but his presence was immediately striking. Tall, with a lean build and a thoughtful posture. His hair was a rich, dark brown, falling just a little over his forehead, and his hands, clasped loosely around a ceramic mug, looked strong and capable. When his eyes finally met hers, a jolt, warm and undeniable, shot through her. They were the color of warm honey, and they held an intelligence and a profound gentleness that instantly reassured her. A slow, tentative smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It wasn't a dazzling, confident grin, but a soft, genuine expression that reached all the way to her soul. It was exactly as kind as his words had promised. He rose as she approached, his movements fluid and graceful. "Elara," he said, his voice a low melodic baritone, exactly as she had imagined it, rich and warm, with a hint of something deeper, like a cello. It was impossibly even more beautiful in person. "Liam," she replied, her own voice a little breathy, a little shaky. The name felt good on her tongue, familiar yet brand new, brand new. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Please, sit. I wasn't sure if you'd come, but I hoped." She slid into the chair, suddenly feeling a little shy, a little overwhelmed. I almost didn't. It's a big step, isn't it?" He nodded, his gaze unwavering, full of understanding. "It is, for both of us, but I'm incredibly glad you did." He pushed a steaming mug across the table towards her. "I took a gamble. Lavender latte." A small laugh escaped her, a sound of pure delight. "You remembered." "Of course, I remembered," he said, his smile widening. "You mentioned it in passing, but it stuck with me, like so many of your words." They sat for a moment in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks, simply looking at each other. There was no awkwardness, no need to fill the space with chatter. It felt natural, as if they had always known each other, and this meeting was simply a continuation of an ongoing conversation. "You look exactly as I imagined you would," Elara finally said, her eyes tracing the gentle curve of his jaw, the subtle lines around his eyes that spoke of frequent smiles. He chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound. "And you, Elara, are even more captivating than your words suggested, which is saying something considering the poetry you spin." His compliment made her blush, a warmth spreading through her cheeks. "You're too kind." "Only honest," he corrected gently. "I've been wondering what you look like for weeks. Not in a superficial way, but I wanted to connect the beautiful mind to the beautiful person." "Me too," she admitted. "I had 1,000 different images of you in my head, none of them quite captured." She gestured vaguely. "The quiet strength, the kindness in your eyes." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "It's strange, isn't it, to know someone so intimately and yet not at all." "But we do know each other, Liam," she said, leaning forward slightly. "More than most people who've known each other for years. We've shared our deepest thoughts, our fears, our hopes, without any filters, without the expectations that come with a first impression." "That's what I love about it," he agreed, his eyes shining. "It was pure, unadulterated connection. I felt like I could truly be myself with you without worrying about judgment or performance." "And I with you," she confessed. "It was liberating and terrifying." "Terrifyingly beautiful," he supplied, his hand reaching across the table, not quite touching hers, but hovering close enough that she could feel the warmth emanating from him. They talked for hours. They spoke of their work, Elara, a librarian with a passion for forgotten stories and the quiet power of books. Liam, a landscape architect who found solace and purpose in shaping natural spaces, in coaxing beauty from the earth. They discussed their shared love for classical music, their mutual disdain for overly sweet desserts, their surprisingly similar opinions on the merits of rain over sunshine. He told her about his quirky habit of talking to his plants, convinced they responded to his encouragement. She confessed her secret joy in organizing her books by color sometimes, just for the aesthetic pleasure, much to the chagrin of strict cataloging rules. They laughed, genuinely and often, a comfortable, easy sound that filled the small cafe. Liam was everything his words had promised and more. He was observant, his honey-colored eyes missing nothing, yet never making her feel scrutinized. He listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard, truly valued. His wit was sharp but gentle, his humor dry but warm. And his vulnerability, the raw honesty he'd shown in his written whispers, was present in his voice. In the way his brow furrowed when he spoke of something important, in the slight hesitation before he revealed a deeper truth. As the morning wore on, and the coffee shop slowly filled with the lunchtime crowd, a sense of deep contentment settled over Ilara. The anxieties had melted away, replaced by a profound sense of rightness. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a homecoming. "I still can't quite believe this is real," Ilara murmured, watching him as he stirred his now cold coffee. Liam's gaze softened. "Believe it, Ilara. This is very real, and I think it's just the beginning." He paused, his expression growing more serious, though his eyes still held that gentle warmth. "I know this is a lot to take in, and we've already covered so much ground in our whispers. But I'd like to continue this if you're willing." "Continue what?" she asked, a hopeful flutter in her chest. "This," he said, gesturing between them. "Exploring this connection, getting to know each other in this new, tangible way, going on an actual date, perhaps?" He offered her a shy, charming smile that made her heart skip a beat. Without the anonymity, without the sugar bowl deliveries, just... "I'd like that very much, Liam," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but firm in its conviction. A wave of happiness washed over her, so potent it almost brought tears to her eyes. "Good," he said, a relieved sigh escaping him. "Because I've spent weeks, months even, wondering what it would be like to sit across from you, to hear your voice, to see your smile, and it's even better than I imagined." He reached across the table, his fingers gently closing over hers. His touch was warm and firm, sending a comforting current through her. It wasn't a demanding touch, but a tender, reassuring one, a silent promise of care. Her anxieties, which had been lurking at the edges of her consciousness, finally dissipated entirely. There was only the present moment, the warmth of his hand, and the quiet hum of a blossoming connection. "So," he said, his thumb brushing lightly over the back of her hand, "how about we have dinner next week? I know a wonderful little Italian place with the best pasta you've ever tasted." "I'd love that," she replied, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. The thought of another evening with him, another opportunity to delve deeper into the layers of the man she was falling for, filled her with giddy anticipation. They spent another hour, simply enjoying each other's company, planning their next meeting, and sharing stories that felt less like introductions and more like continuing chapters of a book they were writing together. When Liam finally had to leave for another appointment, he walked her out of the coffee shop, lingering at the door, reluctant to say goodbye. "Thank you for coming, Ilara," he said, his eyes conveying a depth of gratitude that words couldn't quite capture. "Thank you for asking," she responded, a soft smile gracing her lips. "And thank you for the notes, Liam. They changed everything." He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that reached his eyes. "I think they did for both of us." He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in, pressing a soft, chaste kiss to her cheek. It was fleeting, but potent, leaving a warm tingle on her skin. "Until next week." "Until next week?" she echoed, watching him walk away, his tall figure disappearing around the corner of Elm Street. Ilara walked home in a daze, a wide, unshakable smile on her face. The world seemed brighter, the air crisper, the sounds of the city more melodic. The anonymous whispers had led her to this, to Liam, a man who was even more wonderful in person than in her dreams. The leap of faith, the step out of anonymity, had been daunting, but the reward was immeasurable. She still had so much to learn about him, so many stories to uncover, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this was the beginning of something truly special. The future, once a nebulous concept, now shimmered with the promise of shared laughter, quiet conversations, and the deepening of a love story that had started with a single, whispered word. She couldn't wait for the next chapter. Clara watched him, a soft smile playing on her lips, her heart feeling light and buoyant, as if it had discovered how to float. Liam, sensing her gaze, turned his head, his own eyes, warm and deep like a summer night, meeting hers. The world outside the cozy corner of the cafe they occupied seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet hum of their connection. A next chapter indeed, he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated through her. What do you imagine it holds? Clara leaned back, tracing the rim of her teacup. Oh, everything, she confessed, a shy laugh escaping her. Shared silences, unexpected adventures, discovering your favorite kind of tea, the stories behind those beautiful scars on your hand. Liam chuckled, a genuinely warm sound. You notice a lot, Clara. It was the first time he'd said her name with such deliberate intimacy, and it sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. I try to, she admitted. And you? What do you hope for? He paused, considering. To learn your quiet joys, Clara. The way your eyes light up when you see something beautiful. The dreams you chase when no one's watching. To become a part of your story in whatever small or grand way you'll allow. His earnestness touched her deeply. This wasn't a whirlwind romance built on fleeting passion, but a sturdy, tender burgeoning of something real. They spent another hour simply talking, unraveling threads of their lives, finding common ground in unexpected places, a shared love for old books, an appreciation for the scent of rain, a quiet ambition to make the world a little brighter. When Liam finally walked her home, the city lights twinkled like conspiratorial stars, and the air was crisp with the promise of autumn. Before he left, he gently took her hand, his thumb tracing the back of her fingers. Tomorrow, he asked, his gaze unwavering. Yes, she breathed, her heart a symphony of unspoken hopes. Tomorrow. The next chapter began with a series of gentle, unhurried dates. They explored antique shops, their fingers brushing as they reached for the same worn copy of a classic novel. They walked through sun-dappled parks, sharing stories of their childhoods, Liam revealing a surprisingly mischievous streak, Clara confessing her lifelong habit of talking to plants. They cooked together in Clara's small, sunlit kitchen, Liam's calm competence balancing Clara's creative chaos, their laughter echoing off the walls as they navigated a stubbornly sticky dough or a runaway mushroom. Clara learned that Liam was a quiet architect, his designs known for their thoughtful integration with nature, a reflection of his own grounded spirit. He spoke of sustainable living and the beauty of functional art, his passion shining through his usually reserved demeanor. She, in turn, shared her world as a freelance illustrator, showing him her whimsical character designs and the intricate patterns she wove into children's books. He was fascinated, studying her work with an intensity that made her feel truly seen, truly valued. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond surface pleasantries to the landscapes of their souls. Clara discovered Liam's quiet strength, how he carried himself with a steady grace, yet beneath it lay a profound empathy. He spoke of past heartbreaks not with bitterness, but with a gentle wisdom that had clearly shaped him. She, in turn, opened up about her own vulnerabilities. The fear of creative blocks, the occasional pang of loneliness that had accompanied her independent spirit, the quiet longing for a partnership that felt as natural and comforting as breathing. Liam listened with unwavering attention, his presence a soothing balm. You have a beautiful way of seeing the world, Clara, he told her one evening, as they sat on her balcony, watching the city lights come alive. And an even more beautiful way of expressing it. His words, spoken with such sincerity, settled in her heart like warm honey. As the weeks unfolded into months, their connection grew stronger, weaving itself into the fabric of their daily lives. Liam would leave a thermos of her favorite herbal tea on her doorstep on particularly busy mornings, or send her an encouraging text just when she felt the weight of a deadline pressing down. Clara, in turn, would sketch little caricatures of him in her notebooks, or surprise him with a homemade meal after a long day at his studio. These small, thoughtful gestures became the language of their burgeoning love, a silent understanding that spoke volumes. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they walked through a forest ablaze with fall colors, Liam stopped beneath a towering oak tree. He turned to Clara, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "There's something I want to tell you, Clara," he began, his voice a little softer than usual. "About that first whispered word." Clara's heart gave a little flutter. She remembered that moment vividly, the crowded room, the sense of an invisible thread connecting them. And then his voice, so close, so intimate, speaking her name. "You said my name," she prompted, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "Just Clara." He nodded, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "Yes, but it wasn't just the first time I'd said it. It was the first time I'd dared to say it out loud, directly to you after months of, well, admiring you from afar." He took a deep breath. "I'd seen you around town, at the library, at that small indie coffee shop you frequent. I loved the way you'd get lost in a book, or how you doodle on napkins while waiting for your coffee. You had this quiet grace, this serene focus, and I was utterly captivated." Clara listened, her breath held captive by his confession. The anonymity he'd stepped out of had indeed been daunting for him too. "I wanted to approach you so many times," he continued, a wistful look in his eyes. "But I'm not always the most forward person, and I didn't want to interrupt your quiet moments, so I just watched from a respectful distance, hoping one day an opportunity would arise. And then, at that gallery opening, when we were both looking at that painting of the lone lighthouse, I saw you smile at something, and I just had to say your name, to make myself known, to step out of the shadows and into your light." He looked at her, his gaze vulnerable yet resolute. "It felt like a monumental risk, but it was one I finally had to take. Because I knew even then that there was something truly special about you, Clara. Something I desperately wanted to explore." Clara felt a rush of emotion, a wave of tenderness washing over her. To know that he had seen her, truly seen her, long before they ever spoke, and had carried that silent admiration, meant the world. It wasn't just a chance encounter, it was a destiny patiently unfolding. She reached out, her fingers gently covering his, her thumb caressing the back of his hand. "Liam," she whispered, her voice thick with feeling. That's one of the most beautiful things anyone has ever told me." A tear, warm and unexpected, traced a path down her cheek. "I'm so glad you took that risk." He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that melted her heart. "Me too, Clara, more than you know." As winter approached, blanketing the city in a soft layer of snow, their relationship deepened further. They spent cozy evenings by the fireplace, reading aloud to each other, sharing dreams for the future, and simply reveling in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. There was a profound peace in their connection, an understanding that transcended words. However, even the most harmonious relationships faced gentle ripples. Clara found herself increasingly engrossed in a passion project, an ambitious graphic novel she'd been conceptualizing for years. The deadlines were tight, the creative demands immense, and she found herself retreating into her artistic world, sometimes forgetting to emerge. Liam, ever understanding, gave her space, but Clara began to notice a subtle shift in his demeanor. He was still loving, still present, but a faint shadow of quiet worry seemed to linger in his eyes. One evening, after she'd spent nearly 18 hours hunched over her drawing tablet, Liam brought her a steaming bowl of soup. He sat beside her, watching her work for a moment before gently clearing his throat. "You're doing incredible work, Clara," he said softly. "It's truly breathtaking." "Thanks," she mumbled, not looking up, her mind still wrestling with a particularly challenging panel. "Just almost there." "I know," he replied, his voice still gentle, but with an underlying current of concern. "But I miss you, Clara. Even when you're right here, I feel like you're 1,000 miles away." Clara's pen stilled. She looked up, guilt washing over her as she saw the genuine hurt in his eyes. She hadn't realized how much her single-minded focus had impacted him. "Oh, Liam," she said, her voice filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry. I get so lost in these projects. I didn't mean to neglect you." He reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know you didn't. And I admire your dedication truly, but I also worry, not just about us, but about you. You've been working yourself to exhaustion, and I want to be a part of your life, not just waiting on the sidelines while you conquer your world." His honesty, delivered with such tenderness, broke through her creative haze. She saw the truth in his words, the quiet fear he'd harbored that her passion might consume her, and perhaps consume them. She pushed her tablet aside, turning fully to him. "You're right," she admitted, her voice softer now. "Completely right. This project is important to me, but you're more important. Way more important. I've been so wrapped up I forgot to nurture what truly matters." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for telling me, Liam, for always being so open, even when it's difficult." He smiled, that warmth returning to his eyes. "Always, Clara, always." They spent the rest of the evening simply talking, reconnecting. Clara promised to set boundaries for her work, to ensure their time together remained sacred. Liam, in turn, offered to help in small ways, perhaps by running errands, or simply sitting beside her in quiet companionship while she worked, grounding her in their shared reality. Their gentle ripple of misunderstanding had only served to deepen their understanding, strengthening the foundations of their love. Spring arrived, painting the city in vibrant hues, and with it came a sense of new beginnings. Clara's graphic novel was nearing completion, and she felt a renewed sense of balance in her life, a beautiful harmony between her passion and her partnership. Liam, too, seemed to flourish, his architectural projects gaining recognition, his quiet confidence shining ever brighter. One sunny afternoon, Liam suggested a walk along the river, a place they often went for quiet contemplation. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, raining delicate pink petals onto the path. As they walked hand in hand, Liam's grip tightened slightly. He stopped, turning to face her, his eyes shining with an emotion so profound it took her breath away. "Clara," he began, his voice steady, yet laced with a tremor of anticipation. "Do you remember what I said about wanting to be a part of your story?" She nodded, her heart beginning to pound a gentle rhythm against her ribs. "Well," he continued, reaching into his pocket, his gaze never leaving hers, "I've realized that being a part of your story isn't enough for me anymore. I want you to be the entire story, my entire story." He knelt then, amidst the fallen cherry blossoms, and from his pocket, he produced a small wooden box, intricately carved with a delicate pattern that looked strikingly familiar, a motif from one of her own illustrations. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple, elegant, silver ring, adorned with a tiny, iridescent moonstone that seemed to glow with an inner light. "Clara," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "you stepped out of anonymity and into my life, and you made everything brighter, richer, more beautiful than I ever imagined possible. You are my quiet joy, my unexpected adventure, my truest companion. Will you do me the immense honor of becoming my wife? Will you let us write all the next chapters, hand in hand, for the rest of our lives?" Tears streamed down Clara's face, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She didn't need to think, didn't need to hesitate. Every fiber of her being, every beat of her heart, screamed a resounding, "Yes." "Oh, Liam," she sobbed, laughing through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He rose, a radiant smile transforming his face, and gently slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the moonstone shimmering like a captured piece of the night sky, a symbol of their quiet, luminous love. Then, he pulled her into a tender embrace, holding her close as the cherry blossoms danced around them, showering them with their delicate blessings. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in a sun-drenched garden, surrounded by close friends and family. Clara wore a simple, elegant gown, and Liam, a tailored suit, his eyes never leaving hers as she walked towards him. Their vows were not grand pronouncements, but heartfelt promises of quiet devotion, unwavering support, and a shared commitment to building a life filled with love, laughter, and understanding. As the years unfolded, Clara and Liam built a home filled with warmth and creativity. Their shared laughter echoed in every room, their quiet conversations a comforting presence. They continued to pursue their passions, always supporting each other, always finding balance. Clara's graphic novel became a beloved success, and Liam's architectural firm thrived, known for its beautiful, sustainable designs. But it was in the quiet moments that their love truly shone, in the morning light, as they sipped coffee together, reading side by side. In the evenings curled on the sofa, sharing stories of their day. In the tender glances exchanged across a crowded room, a silent affirmation of their unbreakable bond. Their love story, which had begun with a single, whispered word, had blossomed into a profound, enduring connection. It was a love built not on fireworks and grand gestures, but on the steady, gentle rhythm of two souls perfectly attuned, finding their truest selves in the embrace of each other. And as Clara drifted off to sleep each night, nestled safely beside Liam, she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that their story was a testament to the quiet magic of finding your forever in the most unexpected and most beautiful of ways. And she wouldn't have it any other way.